They nearly ran it over. The headlights caught something pale on the ground, not moving, not fluttering like trash, not scattering like the deer that usually broke from the brush, just lying there. Still, Leah slammed the brakes. The old Land Cruiser bucked forward and groaned, fishtailing slightly on the frost-glazed gravel. Will's coffee spilled between the seats, but he didn't curse. He was already opening the door, boots hitting dirt before the vehicle stopped rocking. They'd been tracking the wolf all morning. A lone female, limping and acting erratic near the southern ridge. Wildlife Services had flagged it, worried it might be rabid, but now, in the halo of the headlights, none of that mattered. Leah followed, flashlight in hand, her breath fogged in the cold. The thing on the trail wasn't roadkill. It wasn't a carcass or old gear. It was a blanket, and something was breathing under it. She dropped to her knees. Will crouched beside her, jaw clenched, not saying a word, just watching, as if his brain hadn't caught up to what his eyes were seeing. Leah pulled the blanket back with shaking fingers. A baby, swaddled in layers of damp cloth and pine, needles cheeks raw with cold, tiny fists curled beneath its chin. It was so quiet, too quiet. But when the beam of the flashlight touched its face, it blinked, slowly, dazed, alive. Oh my God, Leah whispered. She looked up the woods, pressed in around them like something listening. Not a single bird called, not a single branch cracked. It was the kind of silence that felt unnatural. Will finally spoke. How the hell did it get here? They were 12 miles from the nearest forest road. No tire tracks, no boot prints, just a tangle of animal trails and one strange path of disturbed snow leading off to the west, like something had dragged the bundle through the forest before depositing it in the trail's dead center. As if it wanted to be found, Will stood up fast, hand already on his belt radio, but Leah wasn't moving. Her eyes were fixed on something deeper in the trees. There was movement, low, quiet, watching too. Animals sat just beyond the light's reach, eyes glowing, bodies tense. A red fox, and beside it, unbelievably, a raccoon. Not fighting, not running, just sitting there side by side, alert and unafraid. Will, she breathed. Look. He turned, squinting into the dark. The fox cocked its head. The raccoon didn't flinch. They were guarding it. Leah said, almost to herself. They were with it. That's not possible, Will muttered. Those two should have torn each other apart. But they hadn't, and as Leah reached to lift the baby from the dirt, the fox gave a short, sharp bark, not aggressive, almost like a warning. Then both animals stood, and without a sound, disappeared into the brush. Will called it in. The forest lit up red and blue half an hour later, but by then the prints were already half covered with snow. Nothing led to the baby, just the westward drag marks, shallow and strange, like it had been cradled and carried, then set down gently when help was near. Leah held the infant the entire ride back, her arms shaking from more than cold. Later, that night, long after the paperwork and questions, when she sat alone in the station bunkroom staring at the blanket the baby had been wrapped in, she noticed the embroidered edge, hand-stitched, faded pink thread. It wasn't just any blanket. It belonged to a child she'd helped search for 6 years ago, a case gone cold, a missing infant whose body had never been found, a winter storm, a closed trail, a family broken by silence. But that child would be older now, too old to be the one they'd found, unless... No, that was impossible. She set the blanket down like it was made of glass outside. Somewhere beyond the tree line, something howled, soft and high, almost sorrowful. And Leah realized with sudden certainty that the story wasn't over. It had just begun. They named the baby Hollow, after the tree she'd likely been left in, or maybe born inside. No one could say for sure. The ranger report used the term abandonment under suspicious animal behavior. That was as close as the state was willing to get to the truth. No one wanted to log a sighting of cooperative wildlife guarding an infant. No one wanted to write down that the child had been cradled in a perfectly rounded pocket in a lightning-blasted oak stump, lined with bird feathers and scavenged bits of wool insulation. No one wanted to believe that the fox and raccoon hadn't been a coincidence, but Leah had seen their eyes. She'd seen how they'd watched the baby, how they hadn't run, not from headlights or footsteps or human scent, not even from the helicopters that buzzed in the next morning when the department sent in drones and K9 teams to sweep the ridge. Nothing, no prints, no blood, no camp, no sign of a mother or predator or shelter. Just the drag marks leading toward the hollow. The hospital report came back clean. No signs of trauma, no frostbite, slight malnutrition, but vital, stable. The baby was healthy, maybe 6 or 7 months old. No identification, no DNA matches. A blank space in the system. And then, after 72 hours of paperwork and press, silence. The state quietly closed the investigation. It should have ended there, but Will kept coming back to the trailhead, kept walking it every afternoon after shift. Boots crunching frost, eyes scanning the trees like they held answers. And Leah couldn't stop thinking about the blanket. She still had it, hadn't turned it in, couldn't. It had a name, stitched into the corner, partially frayed. Alara, the same name as the infant from that winter storm years ago. The one they never found. The one Leah had searched for with dogs and spotlights and bitter guilt, long after most had given up, but Alara would be 6 years old now, and Hollow was a baby. Except, she wasn't. It was subtle, easy to miss unless you were holding her. The way her eyes lingered too long. The way she stiffened at loud sounds like she already knew what they meant. The way her fingers curled around objects like she'd once lost them. The pediatric nurse at the clinic even mentioned it in passing. She has the reflexes of an older toddler, but the body of a 6-month-old will laugh it off. Born wise, he joked half-heartedly. But Leia didn't laugh, and then, 6 nights after they found her, Leia woke to the sound of wings. She lived in a ranger outpost, tucked into a clearing near the western edge of the preserve. 1 room, a wood stove, metal roof, quiet, or it should have been. But that night, just after 2 a.m., something landed on the roof with a heavy thud, not the flutter of an owl, not the scramble of a raccoon. Wait. She crept to the window, heartbeat pulsing in her ears. The moon hung low, smeared by clouds. The trees stood still, too still, like they were waiting. And in the space between the shadowed pines, just beyond the split-rail fence, they stood, a black bear, and beside it, unmistakably, a young mountain lion. Not moving, not hunting, just standing there. Together, they stared at the cabin, and then, as if on some shared signal, turned and walked back into the forest. Leia didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, she called Will, told him everything, told him about the blanket, the name, the reflexes, the visit. He listened in silence. Then, slowly, he said, "There's something you should see." He drove her 2 miles west, past the logging road and into a narrow bend in the trail, the place they hadn't searched before. The snow here was thinner, churned by melt and wind, but something had clearly passed through, a depression in the brush. Crushed branches, something large. Will knelt and brushed aside a layer of pine needles. Underneath, buried shallow in the earth, was a small pile of bones, animal bones, rabbit, deer, a squirrel, picked clean, arranged, almost, ritualistically. A ring of stones surrounded them, half sunk in mud, and in the center, a piece of pink thread frayed, familiar. Leia reached for it, fingers trembling. It was identical to the thread on Hollow's blanket. She looked up at Will. "What does this mean?" He shook his head slowly. "I think they brought her back. I don't think she was abandoned." That night, she drove to the emergency foster center in town. Hollow was asleep, breathing slow and steady in a borrowed crib. Leia sat beside her and watched the rhythm of her chest, the twitch of her lips, and she asked the question she hadn't dared until now. "Where did you go?" Because if what they were seeing was real, if the forest had taken the child 6 years ago and returned her now, untouched by time, then something else had happened in that hollow tree. Something unnatural, something older than any of them understood. And what haunted Leia more than anything wasn't the miracle of Hollow's return. It was what had kept her alive, because those animals, they weren't guarding her out of instinct. They were protecting her from something, and whatever it was hadn't stopped watching. It was still out there waiting. Leia didn't tell anyone about the stone circle. She photographed it, logged it as an Uniswal predator cache, knowing it would be buried in a forgotten folder. But the truth stayed with her, lodged under her ribs like a bone that wouldn't pass. Something about the way those stones had been arranged, not random, not natural, had left a chill in her blood. A predator doesn't sort bones, a predator doesn't braid thread, but something else might. The following days unraveled slowly, with silence hanging over everything. Hollow was transferred to a private foster couple in a small house on the edge of town. Leia met them once, quiet, middle-aged, kind enough, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were hosting something they didn't understand, something that didn't belong inside drywall and electrical heat. Will withdrew to PT. No longer asked about the investigation or joked about baby cryptids like he had before. He started driving back out to the ridge alone, leaving early, returning late. When she asked what he was looking for, he gave vague answers, just checking cameras, watching movement. But his eyes were always tired, like he hadn't really slept since the night the bear and mountain lion came. Leia's own sleep was thinner by the hour. The forest had changed. She felt it every time she stepped beneath the canopy, a subtle wrongness in the way the wind moved, in the 2 quiet branches overhead. As if the woods were watching now, listening, waiting. And then, on a Wednesday near dusk, Hollow disappeared. The foster parents were folding laundry. 10 minutes, maybe less. They swore the door had been locked. No open windows, no dog barking, just a moment of silence, and the crib was empty. The house erupted into panic. Police, drones, the works. But Leia already knew where to go. She drove straight into the preserve, past the boundary gate, past the ridge where they'd found her, deep into the valley. Headlights cutting through early mist. She didn't know how she knew, only that she did, and she was right. She found Hollow, wrapped in a blanket at the base of the same split oak stump, eyes open, unharmed, barefoot, but warm to the touch. Her body had been placed with such care it made Leia's throat close. This time there was no fox, no raccoon, but further up the hill, in the half-light of the trees, she spotted something worse, a human figure, tall, watching. She shouted, hand on her radio. The figure didn't run, it only turned, slowly, and vanished behind the trees. It was enough. A search team combed the valley all night. They found no tracks, no campsites, no discarded gear. Just one footprint, human, adult-sized, pressed deep in moss not 20 feet from the hollow. Barefoot. The official report called it a possible abduction attempt. They tightened the foster center's security, and Hollow was moved again, this time to a medical facility under protective custody. But Leah didn't feel relief, only dread, because something was changing in the child. She wasn't growing, exactly, not taller or heavier, but she was shifting. Her eyes tracked faster. Her head turned with uncanny precision, always toward motion. She started making sounds that didn't belong in her throat. Not crying, not cooing, mimicking the rattle of the vent, the ring of a doorbell, the exact cadence of Will's voice saying stay back. And then one morning she laughed, a single sharp laugh, like an echo of someone older, someone who remembered something. It wasn't the sound that terrified Leah, it was the timing. Because Hollow laughed before anything happened, before the nurse dropped the metal tray across the room, as if she knew it was coming. Leah started digging old reports, wildlife incidents, disappearances near the preserve over the past decade. Most were mundane hunters who got lost, hikers who wandered off. But a pattern emerged. Every 6 years, in winter, one case stood out, always near the Western Valley, always a child. One was a 3-year-old girl who vanished from a campground, found 2 days later in perfect health, curled beside a den of hibernating badgers. Another was a boy, 5, who went missing during a snowstorm. They found him sitting in a pine tree 20 feet off the ground, wrapped in crow feathers. No one connected the cases, different counties, different years. But Leah saw it now. The forest gave them back, and maybe not all of them came back the same. She confronted Will that night, cornered him in the ranger station, demanded to know why he'd stopped looking worried, why he didn't seem surprised. Anymore he didn't argue. I've seen it before, he said quietly, years ago, before you got transferred in. He told her about a boy they found near Raven Rock, alone, soaked to the skin. He hadn't spoken for weeks, but he'd drawn symbols in the dirt. Symbols that weren't from any child's game. Ones that looked carved, not written. His foster parents moved out of state. Took him far from the preserve, but Will always wondered if that was far enough. Leah asked why no one ever warned her, why it wasn't in any report. His answer was simple: because no one wants to believe the forest takes things. She didn't sleep that night, and in the early hours as she watched the wind move through the trees outside her window, something clicked into place. It wasn't just about Hollow, or even the others. Something in the valley was hungry, not for flesh, not for blood, but for time, for children. It took them, changed them, then gave them back when it was done, or when it was ready. And Hollow, she wasn't the last. She might be the first of something new. The sound came just after midnight, faint, steady, not quite mechanical. Leah woke with the feeling that something was already in the room with her. Not a presence she could name, not fear exactly, but a deep wrongness that pulsed low in her spine. She sat up slowly. The sound continued, like fingernails brushing lightly across metal. She scanned the shadows, nothing moved. But when she stepped barefoot onto the floorboards, they were cold, not winter cold, earth cold, damp, wrong. She followed the sound to the front door, heart pounding. Opened it. The forest beyond was dead quiet. No wind, no snow. Just a smear of gray moonlight against the trees. She stood there, breathing shallow, eyes adjusting, and that's when she saw it. A line of stones, neatly arranged, stretching from her porch steps into the dark. Each was small, wet, perfectly round. She stepped back inside and locked the door. The next morning Will didn't show up for shift. No call, no message, nothing. She drove to his cabin after trying his radio twice. The place looked normal from the outside. Firewood stacked, snow undisturbed, but the door was ajar. Inside, the silence was immediate, the kind of silence that has weight. His gear was there, boots by the stove, rifle on the rack, coffee still in the pot, long gone cold. But his jacket, the thick green ranger parka he never went without, was missing. So were his binoculars and sidearm. Leah found a note on the table, hastily written on a weatherlog sheet. Saw the tracks again, heading west. Big ones, not bare. Don't follow. She stared at it for a long time, then grabbed her own gear. The western ridge was windswept and bare, its evergreens stunted by rock and exposure. Leah moved fast, boots crunching hard into frost, eyes scanning the trail for anything out of place. The prints appeared around midday, broad, round, spaced wide apart. She crouched beside one and pressed her glove into it for scale. Larger than any wolf, deeper than any deer. She kept going. Hours passed. Then something flickered at the edge of her vision, movement in the trees below. She descended fast, cutting through a gully of bramble and scree, thorns raking her sleeves. Then she heard Will's voice, low, urgent, calling her name. Leah, no. Go back. She slid into a clearing and stopped cold. Will stood at the far edge, rifle lowered, eyes wide, and behind him, just inside the tree line, was Hollow, not crawling, not crying, just standing in the snow, motionless, watching. She looked older, taller, not by much, but enough. Leah took one step forward. Will shouted, "Don't come any closer." His voice cracked. Not angry, terrified. "She led me here," he said. I followed the sound. Same one you heard, didn't you? I thought it was just ... curiosity. I didn't realize she's not alone. Leah felt the hairs rise on her neck. Then she saw them, eyes, pairs of them low to the ground, high in the branches, glinting from every direction, motionless and unblinking. Fox, owl, bobcat, bear, creatures that never shared territory, standing shoulder to shoulder in absolute silence. Not one moved, and behind them, barely visible through the shifting trees, was something else. Not an animal, not a person, a shaped or tall, thin, antlered. It didn't step forward, it didn't need to. Leah couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Something inside her knew this thing wasn't part of the forest. It was the forest, or what the forest had once belonged to. Then Hollow raised one small hand and pointed to the center of the clearing, to the hollow tree. And Leah understood this wasn't an abduction, it was a return. The thing in the forest hadn't just taken children, it had kept them, fed them, shaped them, slowed their clocks, and steeped them in a stillness no human could touch. The forest was a cradle, a chamber, and every so often it sent one of its children back, but only after they belonged to it. And Hollow, she was no longer someone's missing child, she was its voice. Leah stepped back, heart hammering. Will didn't move, his eyes were fixed on Hollow like he was seeing a ghost in sunlight. She told me things, he whispered. Names, events, people we never found. She remembers. Leah shook her head. We have to leave. No, Will said quietly. We can't take her. She's not ours to take. Then the ground shifted, or seemed to. A wave of pressure moved through the clearing, like the air itself held breath. The eyes vanished all at once. The antlered shape dissolved into shadow, and when Leah blinked, Hollow was gone. Only Will remained, kneeling in the snow, head bowed. She tried to reach him, called his name, but he didn't answer, just kept whispering something to the ground. Something she couldn't hear. She had no choice. She left him. Back at the ranger station, she filed an incident report she didn't sign. She sent it to no one. The draft sat in her desk drawer, next to the blanket with Alara stitched in fading pink. The forest didn't come for her again, but it didn't need to. She knew it was still out there, still watching, still raising its children in the hollow dark. And somewhere, under roots and snow and silence, Hollow waited, older now, maybe stronger, waiting for the next return, and this time she would not come alone. Snow came late that year. It clung in soft silence to every branch, every post, every unspoken thought. The preserve was quiet, not from the weight of winter, but something deeper, a hush that had nothing to do with wind or cold. Just absence. Leah walked the ridgeline alone now. Her radio remained silent. The Western Valley had been closed too, the public after Will's disappearance. Unstable terrain was the official cause. She hadn't corrected it. There was no trail marker, no warning sign, just silence. That's how the forest wanted it. Weeks passed. The state sent new rangers, younger ones, with crisp uniforms and bright eyes, who didn't ask about the tree hollow. They didn't last. Too many cameras short-circuited, too many reports filed and forgotten. Eventually they moved to other stations, transfers, burnouts, new posts. But Leah stayed. She stayed because she couldn't leave, not after what she'd seen, not after what she'd understood. Hollow had been a message, not a rescue, not a mistake. A quiet, deliberate reminder that the wild didn't need to shout to make itself known. It only needed to be patient. Some nights Leah would sit at the edge of the fire pit behind the station, coffee cooling in her gloved hands, and she'd listen. Not for animals, not for voices, but for something more ancient, the rhythm beneath the forest, the breath of something old and root-bound and vast. It didn't speak in words. It didn't ask to be found. But once it touched you, once it chose you, you never truly left it behind. She dreamt of Hollow sometimes, not as a baby, not even as a child, but as something in between, a flicker of human light in a body shaped by time that didn't move forward like hers did. In one dream, Hollow stood beside the burnt stump, hair like moss, arms outstretched toward the sky, not lost, not afraid, simply home. Other times Leah dreamt of Will. He never said a word in those dreams, that just watched from the trees with the expression of someone who had finally stopped resisting. She woke from those dreams with a feeling like grief, but without pain, just a hollowed-out quiet, the kind that comes when someone has gone where you can't follow. The child wasn't the only one who changed. Leah had become quieter, still, but not stuck. She no longer checked the cameras obsessively or hounded local agencies for updates. She stopped asking questions she'd already answered in her heart. The forest didn't owe her an explanation. It never had. It had given her a glimpse, a rare, brutal, beautiful glimpse into something older than names or science or loss. And that glimpse had changed her forever. One late afternoon in early spring, she returned to the hollow tree. No one had touched it since. The night hollow vanished. The wood had blackened more, twisted with age, its shape resembling a cradle turned inward. Around it, new growth was beginning, ferns unfurling, saplings breaking through frozen ground. The clearing was warmer than the rest of the woods, as if something inside the soil pulsed gently with heat, not threatening, just alive. She didn't speak, just sat on a fallen log and let the air move around her. It smelled of wet bark and thawed roots. The earth was shifting again, as it always did, quietly, steadily, without permission. That's when she noticed the stone, small, round, wet, resting at the base of the stump like a gift. She picked it up slowly, brushing moss from its smooth surface. There was nothing carved into it, no symbol, just the weight of memory, the echo of something that had passed through this world and left no scar, only a space. Leah held it to her chest, closed her eyes and exhaled. She had spent years fearing what she didn't understand, trying to chase it, label it, pin it down, but it was never meant to be solved. Some stories aren't puzzles, they are warnings, prayers, promises, and this one had done what it came to do. Later that night, she wrote a single page in her notebook. Not a report, not an official log, just words she needed to leave behind. If you find her, don't ask her to remember, don't make her choose, just sit quietly, let her breathe. She belongs to something older than us, and she is not lost. She never was. Leah folded the page and left it in the hollow tree. Then she walked home, and the forest, vast, ancient, unknowable, breathed around her, still and steady like the heart of something that had never stopped watching.